Having a leg lock shootout with Diego Pato is probably not the best idea.
Somebody reefs like this, up, pulling this across my body, here.
And after the W&O event, the talk of the town was his outside heel hook against Dante. So let's use this video to see what we can learn from this sequence. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Flow Grappling, because I've been working hard to add more YouTube videos to the database, which makes for a very seamless study experience when you're using the Outlier database. And they were nice enough to post this whole event on YouTube. So if you're interested in this tool to study jiu-jitsu, the link is in the description below. And you'll also gain access to a Discord of over 1,000 nerds just like you. And now let's dive in. When entering into the legs, you can do so by taking a grip on the inside of their leg with what's called a scoop grip. And when you take this grip, it can lead to nice knee bar options. But it can also be harder to hold on to the leg. Or even worse, they can free their leg and take your back. So generally, I'd say the safer option is to enter the legs with a grip on the outside, called an overclasp. And if you're able to enter into the legs with this overclasp grip, there's often going to be immediate heel exposure. And this is what Diego Pato did to finish with an outside heel hook. So if you choose to enter the legs by taking a scoop grip, you're not going to have immediate heel exposure, but you can threaten a knee bar. And if your opponent escapes that initial knee bar threat, you can then transfer to the overclasp grip and start to attack the heel. Now, what we've been talking about so far is if you grip the leg that's straight in front of you. But from a situation like reverse de la Riva where you're gripping across your body, the roles reverse. So now a scoop grip is going to be when you take a grip from the outside. And if you enter into the legs with a scoop grip, you're not going to have immediate heel exposure. However, if you grip across your body from the inside, that's an overclasp grip, which means when you enter into the legs, you're going to have the ability to threaten the heel hook right away. Now in this event, we saw Jacob Couch take a scoop grip on the far leg, and he straightens out his body before tucking his chin inside the crossface arm to begin off-balancing Sebastian and entering into the legs. He then transfers the foot to his armpit so he can start attacking a heel hook, and he takes this triangle foot configuration to help him heist up into a belly down position. And once he gets heel exposure, he goes right back where he came from to get the finish.
I switch my lock, go down to the shoulder. If he stays here, dorsiflex the foot, come back the way I came, finish.
So I'm definitely not saying that entering the legs with a scoop grip doesn't work. But what I am saying is that there were 41 inside heel hook finishes and 30 outside heel hook finishes, for a total of 71 heel hook finishes in the database. And we have to scroll over here a little bit to see that there are 14 knee bar finishes. So there's a lot more heel hooks than knee bars. So to me, it would make sense to prioritize the grip that gives you immediate access to a heel hook. And that would be an overclasp grip. And if the overclasp grip fails on the far leg, you can switch to an overclasp on the near leg. And when you enter into the legs, you can immediately start attacking the heel. So personally, I think it's a better option to enter the legs with an overclasp grip. But a scoop grip is generally much easier to get. So even though we want an overclasp, we might settle for a scoop grip. And some positions like K-guard are much easier to enter with a scoop grip. So if we do play with the scoop grip, we really need to be careful entering into outside Ashi, because the back exposure becomes very real. So if we have a scoop grip, we would prefer to have the leg across our body in a 50-50 situation. So when they try and take our back, it becomes much more difficult. So from something like K-guard, where you're forced to play with the scoop grip, if you pummel your feet to the outside, you're playing with fire a bit. And a safer option could be to leave your legs in place while you bring their leg from one side of your body to the other. So now when you bring your feet to the outside, you're in 50-50 with the scoop grip, which mitigates the back exposure. And from there, you can work your way to outside Ashi, but this time you have an overclasp and you're ready to attack a heel hook. But I think the scoop grip is kind of plan B. And plan A is going to be to figure out a way to make this overclasp grip easier to take. And when doing so, I think we have to start talking about context and posture. It can be difficult to take a crossface against someone who has two arms preventing you from doing so. But when they build up to an elbow and change their posture, now a crossface becomes much easier. If you're trying to threaten a rear naked choke, your opponent can put both their arms above their head. And this posture makes a rear naked choke very difficult, but it makes a shoulder lock relatively easy. From a standing position, it can be very hard to get an underhook against a resisting opponent. But if we take a Russian arm, our opponent changes their posture to defend that Russian arm. And now from this context, their elbow is very far away from their body, making an underhook relatively easy. By extending your arm down towards your legs, you make it very difficult for the top player to insert a hook, but this posture makes it very easy for them to trap an arm. From half guard, when the top player has an overback grip and their legs wide apart, it's going to be very difficult for us to extend our body backwards, but it should be relatively easy for us to get underneath them. Against a supine opponent who leaves their back on the mat, it's going to be very difficult to use a body lock pass. But as soon as they build up to an elbow, now there's waist exposure and we can start to lock our hands for a body lock. So we can do things like control feet and force our opponent to make a decision with their posture. If they fall all the way to their back, it's probably a better idea for us to use loose passing. Or if we grab their foot and they prop up on an elbow, now might be the time to use our body lock passing. Or maybe the posture we're taking to complete our takedowns is leaving our arms extended and vulnerable to be attacked. So mid-match, we can make an adjustment and start to complete our takedowns with a different posture that leaves our arms less vulnerable.
Later in the match, Kenta started to kind of adjust and shoot, like when he would shoot his takedowns, they'd be lower shots and stuff, so it'd be harder for Mica to snatch up arms.
So the idea is certain moves work better with certain postures. And now the question becomes, if we want this overclass grip, what posture are we trying to create to make the overclass grip easier to take? And to me, it looks like we need the legs to be relatively close together, and we also need that knee pointed towards us. If they point it out, it's going to be harder to take that overclass grip. And Diego set it up from this R-guard position.
Grab on the ankle, grab outside right here. So, and do this.
Now when deciding which version of De La Riva you want to play, there's a lot of variables. But the one I wanted to focus on is this foot. By tucking this foot to the inside, you make it hard for your opponent to backstep into your De La Riva leg. You also make it hard for them to attack your non-De La Riva leg. And by putting it on the inside, you prevent them from doing things like leg drags. But the biggest downside to putting your foot on the inside is your opponent is going to knee cut. And they're going to be looking to take an underhook to solidify the pin. And this is something Dante is really good at. But this R-guard configuration makes it very difficult to knee cut. And when they try, it can be a good opportunity to off-balance them.
Try to go to the knee cut. So this one is gonna stop you and it can lift you.
So instead of exploding to switch sides, Dante is gonna try and loosen the grip on his leg, so then he can more controllably switch sides. But this is relatively predictable, and Pato does a really good job of controlling that wrist. And yes, now they switched sides, but they did so on Diego's terms. And even better would be him using an arm drag grip to off-balance Dante as they switch sides. And in order to off-balance someone with this arm drag, we want to create a situation where their wrist is behind their shoulder.
We want to push with the hand on the wrist so that his hand always stays behind his shoulder.
Now, Diego's really good at creating this effect from many different positions, but the one we're focusing on in this video is this variation of De La Riva. And Diego's often looking for an opportunity to push that wrist down as he elevates with his hook, to constantly be off-balancing Dante. So Dante says to himself, man, I gotta make sure I'm controlling this wrist, as well as the other hand that's controlling my ankle. Well, I work to free my leg, and when doing so, he takes a posture where his legs are close together and his knee is pointing towards Diego, which is a great opportunity to look for that overclass grip. So we're here playing from this R-guard scenario, and Dante's doing a good job of controlling the wrist, but his knee is vulnerable to that overclasp. So as Dante moves from the De La Riva hook down to the wrist, Diego takes that overclasp grip on the far leg and begins to switch sides on his own terms, pummeling his De La Riva hook all the way across the body and to the outside hip, setting up his entry into outside Ashi. Now the battle becomes taking weight off of the primary leg, because if that primary leg is heavy, it's going to be very difficult for the bottom player to do anything. And Gordon refers to this as the knee down theory.
If at any point I can get my knee to the floor, you're going to have a much higher success rate of coming forward, pressuring your partner, either passing or taking your partner's back, whatever the case is.
So from outside Ashi, the top player is going to be trying to put weight down over that leg.
Got to put weight into that left leg, keep a strong hook, and he'll be just fine.
Now Diego Pato does a really good job of preventing Dante from putting this knee on the mat. And he uses the idea that if someone is grabbing your wrist, you have indirect control over them. So even though they're the one who has a grip on you, you're the one off balancing them.
Grip fighting is not only about who wins the grip, but also who can move the other partner.
So when Dante reaches down and grabs the wrist, I think he does so with some conviction. because he wants to make it difficult for Diego to create that arm drag effect. But by doing so, he gives Diego indirect control, and Diego uses that indirect control to separate Dante's elbow from his lower body, allowing Diego to effectively start off-balancing Dante.
It looks like he's controlling me, right? Because he's holding my wrist. But it's an illusion. Why? Because his elbow is further from his hip than mine is from my hip.
And this off balance creates a situation where Dante's primary leg has no weight on it. And Diego entered outside Ashi with an overclasp grip, meaning there's immediate heel exposure and the submission comes on very quickly. So to sum this video up, I don't think it's wrong to take a far side arm drag to help facilitate your entry into the legs with a scoop grip. But although they're easier and more common, from what I've noticed, scoop grip entries tend to be less fruitful than ones with overclasp grips. So if we're in a straight hamstring situation and the top player switches sides, you do have the option of taking a scoop grip and entering into outside Ashi, but I think it's going to be much easier for the defender to escape. So ideally, I think we look for ways to create a posture that makes an overclasp grip easier to take, and we're not forced to settle for a scoop grip. And what we're trying to create is a situation where our opponent's legs are relatively close together and their knee is pointed towards us, which will allow us to take an overclasp grip. So now when we enter outside Ashi, if we're able to make the primary leg weightless, we're going to have immediate heel exposure and be able to threaten a strong heel hook attack. Now maybe you're in a situation where you're having trouble getting a hold of your opponent, so you take Craig's advice.
Can concede something. Try to give them something that they can't resist.
And what you concede could be entering the legs with a scoop grip, baiting your opponent to try a wedging back take, because when doing so, they put their own back on the mat, which can give you an opportunity to sweep. And if you're someone making strategic plays like this, then we'll most likely see you in ADCC. But for my training, I'm trying to prioritize entries into the legs with an overclasp or a cross overclasp grip. So maybe we start in K-guard with a scoop grip, forcing our opponent to bring their secondary leg in towards our tailbone. And by taking this posture to prevent our K-guard entry, it opens up a nice opportunity to switch to a cross overclasp and work to enter into cross Ashi. And you can find out more about this specific technique in this YouTube video or in Owen's instructional.
But this entry was pretty interesting. You'll catch it on my DVD, by the way.
And if you're interested in the tool I use to study jiu-jitsu, it's called the Outlier Database, and the link is in the description below. And I'll talk to you in the Discord.